Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. Haley, happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday, Dan. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I really don't even know how to begin because we've got so many things to cover. I really just wish we had half a day. You know, I think that the radio station should just,
So you want 12 hours?
well, a half of a work day. So like 4 hours.
Okay, I see.
That would be great. That would be adequate. I don't need 12. I don't demand unreasonable things, Haley. 4 hours is reasonable, and we could cover all the things I want to cover at the pace I would like to cover them, with all the little side journeys along the way. But I don't have that time. I've got X amount of time, and we've got to cram in so many good things. So we're going to just try. At the end of the show today, we're going to talk about laundry mistakes.
Yeah, I think these are really, really common.
Yeah, really common. 3 simple laundry mistakes that will help you up your laundry game.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to do that. We'll also be talking about the contest that we're running right now.
Right.
And a possible mistake that you could be making regarding that contest, which would be
Not entering.
not entering. We're going to help you figure that out and get you entered so you could potentially win a $1,000 home improvement package.
Yeah, you do not want to miss those segments.
Yeah, that contest ends November 3 at noon. We'll tell you more about that next. Right now, let's talk about a workshop project or mistake that happens on our projects, and it involves an orbital sander. And I've got one. I think most people do. You know, it's a really common DIY tool. And when I use that, I always have in the back of my mind the resignation, the understanding that when I sand whatever I'm sanding, there's a really good potential that I'm going to have the little pigtail swirls in the surface. And I'm going to have to just live with it.
We've all seen those probably if we have an orbital sander, because I think we all make the mistakes that cause those to happen.
And that's what's interesting to me is that it is mistakes that cause those to happen.
Right. It's not the sander itself.
I had assumed it's just the nature of the sander, and it's what I have to accept in order to get the speedy sanding results that the sander will give me. You know, it's that trade-off. And it turns out you don't have to trade anything off.
No.
You can get beautiful, immaculate results.
Yes.
No swirls if you do things right. So let's talk about what you need to do it right, and we'll put all of this in the show notes so you can go back and check it out, because we'll go through as many of them as we can, but you might want to get all the details in the show notes. First thing, you've got to start the whole process right. And that means don't hold the sander in the air and then turn it on before putting it on the surface. That's the wrong way to start.
That really blows my mind. Like, I understand it now that we're talking about it, because what happens is it starts and it's moving at a really, really fast pace because it's just in the air. There's no resistance.
There's no pressure against, right, there's no resistance.
And so then you put it on the table or whatever you're sanding, and now it's skipping along a little because it's meeting resistance for the first time. You start getting all these little gouges.
Yeah.
And I never thought that was a big deal because I just thought, well, that's just how you start. No.
Right. I always thought it was actually better for it because I didn't want to, damage or bog down that motor by having that disc already be against the surface before I turn it on. I wanted to turn it on where there was no resistance, get it up to speed, and then put it down. That's just completely wrong. Put it on the surface. You're not putting pressure on it at that point. Just lay it on the surface, control it, turn it on. Start right. Very first step. Second thing, and this is 3 main points that you got to remember, like trifecta.
And they're
things that will
so
get great results.
important.
Right. You've got to use the correct speed while you're sanding. You've got to keep the sander flat, and you've got to use the right pressure.
Yeah, the correct speed. I think probably all do this wrong. When I have the sander in my hand, I'm moving it back and forth across the surface fairly quickly.
Right.
You know, because I think I'm making it go faster. You know, when I'm sanding with my hand.
Yeah, hand sanding,
I'm
go
just
fast.
moving it across the surface. And that's how you get things sanded. Well, that's not what you need to do when you have a sander that's doing the work for you.
Yeah, you've got to let it do it. The rule of thumb is to let it move an inch for every second across your surface. So just let it do its thing. That's the first thing. Keep it flat. You know, that's pretty obvious, but I tend to angle it up. I'll sometimes hold it so that I've got just the front point, the front part of that nose of that sanding disc on my surface, and I can really get a lot of pressure that way. Easy way to, of course, get gouges, get swirls, get all of those things. Keep the disc flat on the surface at all times, and then use the right pressure. If you are pushing down on it, like I tend to do, thinking that I'm doing better
Definitely
work,
do that too.
if you push down on it and you hear the motor bog down,
Yeah,
and
it's
we
running a
all
little
know,
slower now.
right? I always think that's when I'm finally starting to really sand.
Yeah, it's getting through stuff now.
No, completely backwards. Don't do that. You're just using enough pressure to control it and to keep it under guidance.
You're guiding it across the surface slowly and evenly.
Yep.
You don't need to put a ton of pressure because when you do that, again, you're creating those little pigtail curlicues all over the surface.
Yeah. So those three things. Another one, work your way through the grits. We have different grits for a reason. Not
You
just
mean you
because,
can't just use a 150 for everything?
No, or an 80 grit for always those kinds of projects. You're supposed to work through the grits. And when you work through the grits, you're going to eliminate those swirls.
Right.
And so the big thing is you start with the coarser grit, whatever that needs to be for your particular project, and then you bump up to the very next grit.
Yeah, so let's say you started with an 80 grit. The
Right.
next one is 100 grit.
Exactly.
The one after that's 120.
My tendency would be to go to the 80 grit if I know I need to.
Sure.
And then I'll come to like a 220 to get a nice polish on it.
Yeah.
Or I'll go to a 150.
Yeah.
You can't be skipping grits.
Nope, doesn't
so work
work.
your way up just like it's through gears, as you're shifting gears or something like that.
Yeah, I can't skip them.
Definitely. Another thing is you've got to make sure you're using dust extraction.
Sure.
Extraction. I don't think extraction is a word, but it is kind of fun to say. So use dust extraction and dust removal, whatever that means for you and however you need to do that.
Blowing things off, vacuuming it, wiping it down.
So first off, between grits, you sand everything with your 80 grit, and then you're swapping over because you're doing the right thing. You're swapping to your 100 grit at that point. Make sure you're blowing all of that dust off or vacuuming all of that dust off of your surface before you start the next grit sanding, okay? That's one thing. Another thing is to prevent the dust, or at least as much of it, from accumulating under that sanding disc as possible, and that's by using like a shop vac attachment for your sander.
Yeah, we all probably have those little bags attached to the end of the sander, and that collects a little bit, but the vacuum's going to get way more.
Definitely look into that. Last thing we've got time for is to stop right. We talked about starting right.
Yep.
Stopping right is important too. Don't stop with the sander on the surface. That's like slamming on the brakes.
The opposite of starting.
Pick it up while it's still going, while it's still spinning, and then turn it off, and then let it just settle down right there. There you go.
Exactly.
There's a number of things. There's a few more. You can check them out in the show notes. That's all the time we've got on this. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about our contest and how you could be one of our big winners. That's all just ahead. Stay tuned.